Here we are with another Halloween season review. We just talked recently about The Clown Prince of Crime with the Joker movie that just came out recently. And so we're going to move from one clown to another clown. And with the Terrifier 3 having just released recently to rave critical reviews, apparently, I figured it was time to start talking about the Terrifier. Let's get into it. It was my plan to watch this movie when I did. I was doing other things and it just popped up, and I found myself not being able to look away, and I ended up watching the whole movie. So here's this conversation about the Terrifier. So off the top, initially, I think what struck me about this movie is that a lot of it feels like a throwback to earlier slasher films. Think of films like Friday the 13th or Halloween even, I think, which to me is still hands down one of the best slasher movies ever made. The original Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween. And this movie feels like that in some ways. I think initially from the opening credits and the closing credits, something about it feels very retro. I like things that are made in this modern time that we're living in, but that also pay respect to what came before in ways that may not necessarily be apparent to someone who's not paying attention to that kind of thing. But I think immediately that's what pulled me in was the retro feel of it. The packaging feels very retro, and at the same time, the way it's staged, even from the opening shot. The first scene is a shot of an old television, little mini TV, and we are introduced to an interviewer. It's like a newscast interview special, and this woman is interviewing the last survivor of the attack of Art the Clown, and so that's our entry point into the story. And it's an interesting way to immediately. I mean that literally. It is something that inspires interest. You want to know more about what happens and why. It's very simple intro. You got a little TV on a desk somewhere, and we're seeing parts of this interview play out, and immediately your interest is piqued, and you want to know what's up. So you go from there to a cutaway to Art, who we presume this is Art, getting his gear ready to go and jack people up. What I find funny about this intro of the movie is that it's treated like, to me, the first thing I thought of was like Batman. Not all Batman movies do this, but you remember something like Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, the intro to that, the first sort of sequence after the opening credits, or even something like Batman Dead End. I don't know if you know that short film. That's a great short film. If you don't know that, Batman Dead End, look for that. I plan to talk about it on this channel at some point because I just watched it again recently. It's fantastic. But what I bring that up because it is a part of this sort of history of characters getting ready for actions. You see this in action movies all the time where someone's in their lair or where their home base, and you see them grabbing tools that they need for the job. This is what we have with Art. He's getting his tools ready, and he's going to go out and wreak some havoc. This is what's going on, and you want to see that. I don't know if I personally, if I wanted to see that, but this is the subgenre that we're working with. In a slasher subgenre, there's a feeling of, for audiences anyway, my read of some slasher movies is that the killer is the main character, and whoever else we see or we're following is like the fake main character. Audiences seem to root for the killer. And there's something that I'm not sure I know how to reconcile as an audience member. Take that for what you will. But the star of the show is the killer. You look at Halloween. Halloween now people talk about Laurie Strode and stuff, but there was a point in time I can remember being very young, growing up, having it took me a while to watch those movies. But Michael Myers is the that's the name. You want to see the new Michael Myers movie. You don't want to see the new Laurie Strode movie. No one talks about that. You talk about the killer because you know they're going to jack people up, and you want to see how they're going to jack people up. What new creative ways did the filmmakers come up with to have this guy jack people up? And I think in that sense, Terrifier is no different than any other slasher in that way, which is to say that there's kills, and I think what sets it apart from other slasher movies is the kills are particularly brutal, and which you might find some other brutal kills in other slasher movies, but something about this feels particularly rough. It makes me a little nervous for the Terrifier 2, which I hear is worse. So I'm working my way up to that. I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, something about that is it's kind of rough about this movie. So in thinking about this movie and talking to other people who had seen it, one of the observations that came up was that most of the victims are women in this movie, which is not uncommon for slasher movies. You see a lot of, well, I think it's changing now, but from the very beginning, the victims were mostly women, and you had men who were getting jacked up too. But I think the same is true in this movie, and but particularly is there's something about the kills in this movie that feel very personal, and if you're not thinking about it, it's kind of like it's a throwaway whatever. But when you start thinking more deeply about it, as I did, it feels like, wow, what does art have against these women? One of the women, okay, she was messing up. I don't know that her kill needed to be as brutal as it was, but it's just something that I recognize. I want to take a second to talk about Art as a character, and he is a character. No, make no mistake. Now Art doesn't speak, and I think that makes him more terrifying. A lot of the villains that you come across that are silent, like Jason, Michael Myers, the guys that don't speak, immediately gives them it makes them much more unpredictable and that much more scary because they're not making any sounds. Even when you attack them, when you hurt them, they don't scream, they don't grunt. They're just like you're just like a force of nature or whatever it is. It just does stuff, and there's something immediately terrifying about that. And I appreciate that about the character. The other thing that's interesting about Art that separates him from other villains is there is an innate humor about the character too that's also disturbing. So you might have him do something that's particularly terrible, and then he might make a gesture or do something that actually you could see how it could get a laugh out of an audience member, and it's uncomfortable and it's amusing, but rarely was it for me laugh out loud funny. And maybe I'm too sensitive. And in fact, I'm willing to concede that is probably the case. That said, I could still see the amusement in it. And I think that amusement is what speaks to the spirit of fun, even though the proceedings is quite brutal. There's that element. And along those lines, when we're talking about the brutality, that opens the door for discussion on practical effects. And I think the practical effects in this movie, that's another really strong element, because it's amazing that a movie made within the last 10 years has the kind of violence that's not computer generated. Something about it feels that much more visceral. because it's practical, and it's pretty good practical effects. So if that's your thing, and you can appreciate that, the Terrifier is not going to disappoint in that area. It's also not going to disappoint on the kinds of kills that you get. It's if you want to see some kills, it's going to get you that, but it's going to give you that. But my one criticism about the kills is, look, call me old fashioned. I much prefer kills in the slasher genre that are more suggestive, meaning you get right up to the door and maybe you crack the door, but you don't open it all the way to see what's in the room. You know, if you know what I'm saying. And I think further, I guess what I'm saying is that I would have preferred less graphic kills. It was kind of it was a little bit like, well, it was kind of in your face, but it's weird because not all of them were like that. It was a little bit inconsistent in that way, and that's not a bad thing. That's just just an observation I'm making. But yeah, I think, look, I can watch slasher. I can get down with some slashers. I think the less gory, the less sort of in your face, the better for me, because I think that still evokes this, or minimal. If it's minimal, that's cool. I think if you go back to something like Friday the 13th and the kills in that movie, which were edgy for that time, I think if you were to go back to that and do kills like that, that's right up against the line, I think, for me. If you go fine, you can go crazy or whatever, but that's fine. But if it's a matter of preference, then I think I would cut it off at Friday the 13th type of kills, the original 1980 Friday the 13th kills. Yeah, this one was a little bit too. It was right there, like, oh, this is red zone kills for me, and I don't know that it's borderline. And it makes me more worried about Terrifier 2 because I understand it's. I'm a little bit concerned about. Having said that, look, if that's what you want, you're gonna get that. You're gonna get some gritty kills, and it's gonna be. I think just for the. But it's a toss up though. It's like, if you don't want to see gritty kills, but you can appreciate the practical work on display, the practical effects on display. It's like that for me. I could do without the how visual it was, but at the same time, I could see, wow, that's actually really cool how they achieved that. So take that for what you will. Look, at the end of the day, the Terrifier has a story that is, and you know me, I'm always talking about narrative. Like, I'm a big fan of narrative when it's unique and it offers something that is not expected, and that it does something that just makes you go, oh, I can appreciate the approach. So for the most part, the narrative is mostly forgettable, but I can appreciate what it does, how it plays with its characters, and how you think one character is going to do something and they do something else. How you think one character is going to do or be something, and you might not get that, or you might. It just depends on. You might still. It depends on how you see it. I can appreciate the way the narrative plays with its pieces, and the way certain things are foreshadowed, and how things come back and tie themselves up in a bow that is maybe not super neat, but it's effective. And that's really, I mean, that's all you can say, really. That's all I can really say about that. At the end of the day, Terrifier is a slasher through and through. If you want all the hallmarks of slashers and things are there, just know that. And I think that's going to do it. Hey, if you see it, let me know. I'm curious what you think about it. I'm going to get myself ready to watch Terrifier 2 coming up. And at some point, maybe I'll get myself prepared to watch Terrifier 3. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video. And come on back. Stay tuned for the next review. I'm getting out of here. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.